Shalom Aleichem, holy people, peace be upon you, from Jerusalem. Apparently it's the capital of Israel now. No, I'm kidding. It always was, and Bezrat Hashem, with God's help, it always will be. And we're very grateful to President Trump, whether you voted for him or not, okay? So we're very pleased with the news, and we're going to name the first train station in Jerusalem after him, apparently. Anyway, hopefully you all get to use it one day. Okay, so on the sheets in English that I gave out, it's chapter 47, but it's verse 28. Believe it or not, that's where the Parsha begins. Hey Zava, let me give you a copy.
Thank you.
My Charusa is not here, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people online.
4.
No, 2, 5.
Okay.
This is for you. So even though we're starting at chapter 47, verse 28, should realize that the way it's written in the English is not the way it's written in the Torah. Now, one of the sheets I passed out on the internet was just an example. It shows you that VaYechi starts in the middle of a block. It doesn't have an indentation. In other words, when you're sitting at a typewriter and you hit enter after writing a paragraph, it begins a new paragraph, correct? You hit enter, new paragraph. Then there's a thing called a tab on your typewriter. When I say typewriter, you know what I mean. Your keyboard on your computer. You hit tab, and now you could preset your tab to X amount of spaces. So there's a thing called an open parsha and a closed parsha. An open parsha means that you hit the enter, not you, this is God, the way God actually commanded Moses to write the Torah. As if you hit enter and it's a brand new paragraph, and it doesn't matter how many spaces there are. But there's a thing called a closed parsha where there's exactly 9 open spaces, letter spaces. It could be on the same line, it could be on the next line, but it's 9 spaces that are between the last letter of the previous paragraph and the first letter of the next paragraph. What's interesting is this is the only parsha that is not just closed, because there's plenty of closed parshiot, but it's closed with no letter spacing. Okay? I need those papers. You don't have a thing to take notes with?
Okay.
I'm giving a shir on Shabbat. I have made copies.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. So the example paper that I gave you shows you, I don't know if you can read the Hebrew enough, but the first verse would say, VaYechi Yaacov be'eretz Mitzrayim, on the example page. Right? Is everyone following me? Nod. Okay, great. So what we're going to deal with mostly is why is this closed? Now let me explain a little bit more history. The Torah in its conceptual form was received by Moses at Mount Sinai, but it was written most likely over a 40-year period, let's say 39-year period, from the time of the revelation until God tells Moses to write the 12 books, actually 13, give one to each tribe and put one inside the holy ark, the Ark of the Covenant. So when Moses was alive, the people complained early on that they had no water for 3 days. And this was through Ruach HaKodesh, through this high level of understanding, Moses understood what they wanted and desired was Torah. So they were complaining they didn't have any water for 3 days. So Moses instituted, this was we'll call it the first rabbinical institution, Moses instituted a public scripture learning session. Let's say Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat. So there's no time, there's going to be 3 24-hour periods, there's going to be 3 days without a public Torah reading. The thing is that they could have read whatever they wanted. There was no set pattern, like we have today, these parshiot. But for sure, during the Hagim, the festivals, they did read the part of the Torah that related to the festivals. Now, Ezra, who was one of the last of the prophets, he's the one who named the Parshiot, and he didn't divide up the Torah, meaning exactly the way we got it from Moses, the way it is. In most cases, the Parshiot, the weekly Parshiot, the weekly Torah portion begins in a new paragraph. Usually it's open, because it's a whole new thought. There are some places, let's say, like, for example, the Christian Bible, meaning the Hebrew scriptures according to the Christians. There's number system. We don't have a number system. Even though I just told you, chapter 47, verse 28, that's not a Jewish concept. That was instituted it was accepted by the rabbis during the Middle Ages, or like towards the end of the Middle Ages, when many debates were going on with Christians. I don't know if you know, famous debates happened, and it was very hard to have a conversation with a Christian during a debate when he was quoting. They developed these numbers, so we accepted them for the sake of talking about the same verse. In other words, after Ezra divided up and said, this is Breshit, this is where it begins, where it ends, Lech Lecha, Noach. So the way Jews discuss the Parshiot, or a verse, they would say, oh, it's in the third aliyah, it's the second or third verse in the third aliyah of Parshas Noach. That's how they communicated the verses. They didn't have numbers, chapters, and verses. But anyway, so we accepted upon ourselves. So if it was up to us, we would not have verse 28 in the middle. It would have been verse 1 of Parsha VaYechi. But it is chapter 47, verse 28, according to the Christians, and we accepted it, again, for practical reasons. Similarly, you should know that even though we're now in the 10th month, and today was the 10th of Tevet, and it does say so in Zechariah that it's a fast day, it's a rabbinic fast day. You should know that even rabbinic, this is one of the big things that Christians have a hard time with, is that they think all rabbinics are like not from God, and we have a verse that clearly says when you don't know what to do, or you go to the rabbis, you have to listen to them. And they're not talking about me, they're not talking about these rabbis, they're talking about the Sanhedrin, right? The great court that is in Jerusalem, or at least was, in the time when we didn't have Yerushalayim. It was by either the tabernacle, and later on in Jerusalem by the Beit HaMikdash, by the temple itself. So you had to listen to them, because they had like that's the way it is, that's the way the authority works. Where was I going with that? So basically, we say Nisan is the first month. When we write dates, it's like a biblical commandment, not January. January 1st it's like forbidden for us to write 1/1. What's the year? 2017, or that would be 2018. So what do I mean forbidden? The way the rabbis understood that, since the Torah says this shall be the first months to you, it's forbidden to call any other month the first month. But because the world uses a system, and you'd screw everything up if you started messing with the system, so the best thing when you write a check is not to write 1/1/2018, but to write the word January, which is also counterintuitive, because these are names of probably gods, pagan gods. But nobody believes in them, so it's a joke. So it's better to write the word January 1st than to write 1/1/2018. Okay, so we're ready to get going. So now we have a little bit of background. Not why, we're going to discuss why, but we see clearly in the scripture itself that this is closed. It's a closed parsha. And we're going to just become familiar with these words. It's called a Parsha Petucha. That means a parsha that's open. Means you hit enter, you got a new line. Or a Parsha Stuma, which means a parsha that's closed. Again, this is very unusual because it has not 9 letters, which is normal, but 0, or let's just call it 1 blank space, 1 letter space. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea why, right? You see right now on 28, it says, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, and the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. So we now know he lived 147 years when he died, but he lived 17 years while in Egypt. Okay, now, the reason I made all these fancy things on verse 28, because that's the verse we're talking about, but look above, verse 27. What we're going to basically see is there's a connection. There's a smichut. Smichut means a juxtapose. One verse is like connected in a way that it's like one single verse. Remember, there's no punctuation in the Torah. You don't have commas, you don't have periods, right? You don't have that. So we're going to see how to read the verse. It's going to make sense. So we start off with a medrash, a famous medrash that asked this very question. VaYechi Yaacov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Yaacov lived in Egypt, as we now know, 17 years. Lama Parsha Zustum. Why is this Parsha closed? And the Medrash gives 3 answers. Interestingly enough, Rashi only brings down 2. So you can already see Rashi. Now, in the source sheets that I gave you, so it pretty much just explained in number 1, what is an open and a closed Parsha. And Rashi brings down only 2 of the reasons we're going to mention. So let's go through the Medrash first, and we'll see which one's missing from Rashi. So it says, the reason why the Parsha is closed, according to the first opinion, is because Yaakov was niftar at the beginning of the shibud. Okay, the word niftar means to pass on from this world. Yaakov died, and the shibud is the slavery of Egypt began. Okay, it's very cursed. It's very short and curt. We're gonna broaden it. We're gonna try to understand what it means. But I know that Meir's listening, and I want to ask Meir, if you could turn on your speaker for a second, your microphone. The word niftar, right? Every Israeli knows the word niftar means he died. Correct?
Correct.
It doesn't mean it. That's not what the word means. But that's what it means. So where am I going with this? When someone is obligated in the commandments, like we are, right? We all have a pulse. We're obligated in the commandments. We're called chayav, obligated. The word niftar actually means exempt. It doesn't mean dead. Who's exempt from the mitzvahs? Who's exempt from fulfilling the commandments of the Lord? Someone who doesn't have a pulse. Someone whose soul left their body. The body is not obligated without the soul. It's only because of the soul being in the body that there's a chiyuv, that there's an obligation. Once the soul leaves the body is patur. Patur means exempt. Okay, Meir, you got it?
Yeah.
The word niftar does not mean dead. Nobody dies, well, except for most evil people, but basically, your soul lives on. And that's going to be also key. But we're going to get to there. We're only on the first line. So the first reason the Medrash gave was because Yaakov died. Now this is the answer to the question, why is it closed? Okay, we're going to see why. The second answer it gives, meaning as an alternative answer, is because Yaakov desired, he wanted to reveal the end of days, meaning the time of the Messiah, the time of the salvation, the time of redemption, the end of days, which we're probably in right now, coming up to. He wanted to reveal, and they were closed from him. It was nistam mimenu. It was sealed, it was closed. He wasn't able to reveal it. We're going to do a lot of discussion about that tonight. And the third was, it's going to be really hard to understand, but we will be discussing it kind of in the beginning of tonight's class. It says that it was closed from him all of the pains of the world. All of the difficult things of the world were closed off from him. So the Kliyakar tells us that's the the version of the Medrash. Now, if you look in the Rashi on this verse, which is number 2, that one, the third one is removed. It's not even there. So what the Kliyakar is basically going to do after he describes 1 and 3 is that 1 and 3 are really the same, and that's why Rashi left it out. At least the way he will present it to us, we'll understand 1 and 3 is the same, and that's why he deals with answers 1 and 3 first, and then we get into the really juicy part of the discussion, which is number 3. Why is the parsha closed? Because Yaacov wanted to reveal the end days, and Hashem closed it off and had good reason why it's not a good thing, or right, his genius why it was best to close it off. All right. Any questions at this point? Okay. How are you doing? Good?
Good, yeah.
I just want to tell you some good news. A good friend of mine, I've been teaching him for the last 10 months. He converted today, and I'm getting together with him later tonight, or if it doesn't work out tonight, tomorrow night, Saturday night. And he's from Amsterdam, and he's just crazy. Amazing guy, and yeah. Okay, let's go. I'm just really happy for him. So the Kliyakar begins by telling us this is the whole story. This is how it appears to me to explain. Since we find here in our Parsha that it's closed, but not in a way that's normally closed throughout the Torah, because what you have here is a shiur, a measurement that is less than any other closed parsha. In fact, here you don't have any room at all. There's no space at all. And he says that absolutely, with 100% intent, Ezra HaSofer, we call him Ezra HaSofer. Another reason why the word Sofer means the scribe. Ezra the scribe, you've all heard of. He was also a prophet. He was probably, there's some opinions he was Nehemiah, and some opinions he was Malachi. Okay, but he was definitely a prophet, and he sat on the last of the Sanhedrin. We call that the men of the Great Assembly, and they are the ones that wrote down how we're supposed to pray. In other words, Jews pray and make all these blessings all day long, which I'm very happy to, at one point, learn them with you, because we talked about the word Jew, and what does it mean in Hebrew? It means the praiser, the one who gives praise, right? Because that's why Leah, on her 4th child, was so happy that she actually received more than her share, that she called him Yehudah out of absolute gratitude and gratefulness. So it's really strange when you're around Orthodox Jews, everything they do, they're making prayers over, right? I mean, everything they eat, every odd things they might see, after going to the bathroom. I mean, we're just so happy and grateful that Hashem has given us, we'll call it health, the ability to go to the bathroom. I don't know if you know any older people or younger people, any people with different kinds of illnesses. Not being able to go to the bathroom can cause toxicity and can cause death. So there's a lot of gratitude in the ability to have a healthy body, but it's a blessing that talks about the heart and the lungs, and it's not just the excrement. It's a whole mindset. First thing we do when we wake up in the morning is we're so grateful that God gave us back our soul. Not everyone wakes up in the morning. So he's giving us another chance, another shot at life, like I mentioned in the last week's Parsha. So anyway, he says, with absolute certainty, Ezra HaSofer decided this is where Yaacov, the story of Yaacov begins. Why? In order to, what's the word, to put it into proximity, meaning he's not the one who said there's no space. God told Moses there's no space. But he decided Yaacov is going to be where VaYechi begins, because he saw the reason that it belongs to the previous verse. The previous verse and this verse is really one real verse, long verse. And what does he mean? He's going to explain it. If you look at the previous verse, it says, Israel settled in the land. Now it's Israel, meaning the people of Israel. We know that because it's plural. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt in the region of Goshen. They, right? It's in Hebrew. They acquired property in it, and they were fruitful and multiplied greatly, and Yaacov lived. Okay, so Yaacov, what do you mean, and Yaacov lived? So we're going to talk a lot about life and what life's really about. So he says, it's as if it's one verse, but the Medrash had three ideas. So therefore, Nichlechu shlosha lashonos elu, there's going to be these three concepts that were darshaned out, that were expounded upon in the Medrash. So the first lesson, the first language that was darshaned out, darshan means to expound upon, like a Medrash, that since Yaakov was niftar, Yaakov, I'll use the word passed on, right? Passed on from this world to the next. That's when the shibud began. That's when the slavery began. Hey, Shalom Aleichem.
Oh,
Come on in.
wow. But I'm studying just
No, we're having shir.
Oh,
I just want you to know, my friend Max converted today.
oh,
Remember? Yeah,
oh,
remember
Zalto.
B'nai Brak? Yeah.
Zalto.
Baruch Hashem.
Zalto.
So we have a few people online.
Sorry.
I'll give you a sheet.
Yeah, thank you.
We're not that far. We're like third paragraph down. Since Yaakov passed on, the slavery began. There's a real connection, a kishur. Kishur means a knot. There's a connection between these two verses in the following way. Since that verse said, and it begins by telling us that Israel settled in the land of Goshen, that teaches us a language of yeshiva, the word settled. Now, we've spoken about this before. Yaakov himself sought to have a peaceful life, a yeshiva. Yeshiva means a permanent settlement, and as soon as he wanted that permanent settlement, the roges of Yosef, meaning Yosef was sold, and he was disturbed. A tzaddik's life, a righteous person's life, if you want to be righteous, don't expect to live an easy life. Don't expect it. Okay? Because it's going to be a rough sailing. You're going to have a lot of opposition. God's going to throw you a lot of tests. But, so this concept of having a yeshiva in general usually has a negative connotation. Here, it's not going to have such a negative connotation because the people of Israel, we will see that it will in the end, that the people of Israel, the Yaakov and the 12 sons were actually living quite well. Okay, they had a life of shalva and menucha. Shalva is peace. Menucha is rest. V'ye'achazu, and they had a land holding. They owned property. They acquired property. That would mean they were landholders in the land of Egypt. And it says they were fruitful and multiplied. V'yipru v'yirbu ma'od. But when did these things happen? Only while Yaakov was alive. Meaning that he was alive. He himself felt very alive. Can you imagine? I mean, I'm maybe having my first grandchild soon. But people who are able to see their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, I imagine that brings a lot of life into their whole consciousness. And not only that, if you go back, so there was a settled, while Yaakov was alive, and this was during 17 years. It was only 17 years. We're going to ask why 17 years. Maybe you have some guesses to make up for let's go on first. So he was alive where his children were not at war with anybody. They were settled in a peaceful way. They were acquiring lots of properties, right? They had a land holding, and they were very fruitful and multiplied well. So this was all while Yaakov was alive in his merit that all this happened, which implies, miklal, which implies that when he died, so too the merit that he had also stopped. and that's when the shibud would begin. Ki lo haya lehem od yeshiva shel shava mitzad shibud. When you're enslaved, first of all, slaves cannot own property. Slaves don't live a life of shalva menucha. They don't live a peaceful, tranquil, restful life. I mean, it's time to make the donuts. You got to get up, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning. And who knows till when you're going to be baking donuts. Or where's the beef? You know, you got to go out and slaughter some, whatever, you know what I'm saying. Like, you're going to constantly work. And how much more so that they wouldn't be able to own any land because slaves are not allowed to own land. And wait till you hear this one. They weren't able to be fruitful and multiply. And if you look on number 3, on the source sheet, right, that the Egyptians wanted to decrease the population of the Jews, right? They would increase the affliction. And how would they, look what it says. This is Pharaoh speaking. He said to his people, behold, the people, the children of Israel, are more numerous and stronger than we are. Right? They thought maybe they'd be a 5th column. Get ready. Let us deal shrewdly. In Hebrew, it is nit chachma, smartly, right? With wisdom with them, lest they increase. Of course, they not only slaughtered our children later on, but they increased the slavery and the work. Why? Lest they increase. The whole idea of increasing the slavery was to decrease the population. Meaning, even if it didn't decrease literally because they didn't start killing us yet, but by working us so hard, by the time we came home at we wouldn't come home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, come home at 10 o'clock at night, be too tired to be with our wives, and we're too worried about getting up on time to make the donuts the next day. And so that was, you can see the connection there, that they were interested in not letting us increase, and therefore increasing the slavery. So even though we just said that, the merit of Yaacov is what kept the shibud coming, the slavery from coming, and as soon as he died, the merit wore off. We can actually say the opposite, but it's still saying the same thing. It was when Yaacov died, the shibud began, and to cut it short, I'll just tell you that how long did Yitzhak and Abraham live? One lived 180, one lived 175, and Yaakov lived 147. He didn't even come close. So we're going to say God took him out early. Why? So that he would not see his children suffer. So he says the beginning of this slavery was actually the reason for Yaakov's death, that God shortened the life of Yaakov, that he did not reach the age of his fathers. So he wouldn't see the slavery of his sons, which would only pain him, because there's a certain time. Now, if you read, I think number 4 in the source sheets, we know, this is very important, we know that at the time that, we call it the Brit Bein Hatarim, at the covenant between the parts, that would be Genesis chapter 5, verse 13. But this was the covenant that God made with Abraham, and he told them that his children will be strangers in a strange land, right? He says here, you shall surely know that your seed will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and they will enslave them and oppress them for how many? For 400 years. Now, all truth be told, we were not in Egypt for 400 years. So what's going on? There's 3 numbers that are important to know. That 30 years before this covenant took place, 30 years after this covenant took place, Isaac was born. Okay? So, that was when he was 75, Abraham was 75 when this covenant took place. He was 100 years old when he gave birth to Isaac. So it's 25, so 70 years, and then 100 years when he gave birth to Isaac. So there's a time in the Torah that says you'll be enslaved for 430 years. There's another place that says 400 years, like right here. But in all truth, we were only there for 210 years. And why were we there only 210 years? Because we were at the base, we were as low as you can get. We were like idol worshippers. And if we went down one more notch, we went down 59 levels of impurity. If we would have gone down one more notch to the 50th level of purity, we would have never been able to be taken out. So God moved everything forward. That's how much He loves us. And the word redu, it says you will go down to Egypt. The word redu is actually the gematria of 210 years. We were only there for 210 years. But the idea over here is that the people knew. That's part of the problem we're going to see later on when Hashem, when what we're about to say, when we're going to say that Hashem took or closed, He didn't allow Yaacov to reveal the end. We'll see that's going to be an important part, because if we all knew exactly when the Messiah was coming, meaning in the long distance, not in the short distance, we might not have any motivation to do tshuva. If we knew He's coming in 400 years and we still have 320 years left,
Relax.
party, we can relax, right? No. So it's better off that the end is hidden so that we don't become lax, as you said. But we're going to see that expounded on much later. Okay, so where we left off, we said, now that's why it says, V'yikravu Yimei Yisrael Lamus. You should know, anytime it says, and this is in our verse, it's actually 29. It says, the time approached for Israel to die. V'yikravu Yimei Yisrael Lamus. V'yikravu means it came close, okay? Anytime it says it comes close in regard to death, you know that the person fell short. He didn't reach the age of his forefathers. He died earlier. Okay? Man, we're learning a lot, right? So Chazal tell us that anytime it says, this is in Bereshit Rabbah, anytime it says, Kriva lo agia lemei avotav, he doesn't reach the age of his fathers. And in this way, we understand the proximity, like we talked about that verse in 27, the verse in 28, is explaining it in a similar way as the first way we explained it. But guess what? That number 17, why 17 is mentioned. How old was Yosef when he was sold?
17.
He was 17.
Tov.
It's Gematria Tov. Shemachirato shel Yosef, that was when Yosef was sold, he was 17 years old. So that was what caused to them, garam lehem shelo yishvu b'shalva Mitzrayim, that they weren't able to live a peaceful, happy life in Egypt except for those 17 years, because the 17 years that Yosef lived with them before he was sold were peaceful, but then everything turned to turmoil. Okay, now we're going to go to number 3. Remember, there were 3 ideas brought down the Medrash. Number 1, because Yaakov died, or we use niftar. Do you know what the word niftar means?
Niftar is close to
die.
die.
But it doesn't really mean to die. Lamut is to die.
As?
From the word patur. Who's patur?
Pitron, the Yosef.
Patur. Exempt. When someone's pulse stops, when someone, we call them death, to physically die, they're no longer obligated to mitzvahs. The patur.
The patur.
Even secular Israelis, non-religious Jews, they all understand niftar means dead. And I have a feeling, because this is called Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, and Jews have a Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, there's no question that even the most secular Israeli understands the depth that there's a thing called a soul that lives on. It's just the body that's niftar. It's patur. But the soul goes on. Anyway.
Very nice.
So we said now we're at the third. So we said there are 3 examples, 3 things brought down in the Medrash. One was since Yaakov died, the slavery began. You can see the top 3 lines. The second was because it was in order to keep or close out the ability for Yaakov to reveal the end days, which we will talk about shortly. But right now we're going to talk about number 3, which was, it was closed off all of the pains of the world. So now we're going to talk about that for only a few lines, and then we're going to talk about number 2 a lot. Since it was closed off from him all the pains of the world. So Yaakov's life, do you know how Yaakov described his life? When he went down to Pharaoh for the first time, can you imagine going in to see Mr. Trump? And the first thing he says to you is, man, how old are you? What does that tell you? It means you look really old, right? You must look like really old. So look at number 5. It's Genesis 47:9. So Jacob said to Pharaoh, meaning Pharaoh actually asked him how old he was. And Jacob said, the days of my years, of my sojournings are 130 years, meaning he's 130 years when he went down to Egypt. And then he describes, the days of the years of my life have been few and miserable. I mean, and they have not reached the days of the years of the lives of my forefathers in the days of their sojournings. He already knows. But in Hebrew, Yemei Shnei Megure, right? Shloshim Umat Shana, they were Ma'at V'ro'im. They were few and bitter, few and ra, evil. They just were not good, the opposite of good. So, if that's how Yaakov's life was when he first went down, how do you think the next 17 years are? If we take that last verse of 27 and connect it with 28, read it again, right? Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the region of Canaan. They acquired property. First they were settled, they acquired property. They were fruitful and multiplied greatly. And Yaakov lived. This was real chayim. This was life for him. And guess what? He forgot all about his past. Meaning, those 17 years were so good that, read in the next part, where it says, the years of his life were 147. We're going to see that it means like as if the 130 bad years didn't even happen. The 17 years were so good that it was limafreya. Limafreya means retroactively all his life was good. As if because of those last 17 years being so great, all 147 years were great. Okay, let's see it in the words. So we already saw when he came down, right, Genesis 47, verse 9, miserable 130 years. Nevertheless, legoydel hashava, the increase of this peacetime, shahayalo tov sheva esrim that happened during the 17 years, sharo yeshiva banav b'shav, he saw his own children living in such a peaceful fashion, and the echazu ba'aretz, and acquiring so much property, and v'yirbu and having so many children, nishkachu, it became forgotten from him, mimenu kol hatzaros rishon, as if they never were. This is the third reason why it's a closed parsha, because what did the third statement say? It was closed off from him all the pains of the world. Okay, as if it's one verse. The whole reason it's a closed parsha is to show us that it's really like one verse. For those 130 years were not even considered at all days of his life. It was only 147. They weren't years of real living. And in fact, those 130 years were plenty of pains. But now, the mafreya, retroactive, turn the page. Akshav, the mafreya, nichshavu kulam shnei chayav. All those years were considered as if he really lived. Those were the years of his life. According to this, that was closed off for him, all the pains that had been in the past, as if they never were. As if all his life was ne'imah v're'evim. Ne'imah means, like the word na'im. Na'im is nice. I mean, nice is not very descriptive, especially if you live in England. They criticize us Americans because we say everything's nice. Nice doesn't mean anything to them. They have to have these weird descriptions of everything. But okay, so he says, Ke'ilu hayachayim nayim ve'eravim. Also pleasant. There was this nice pleasantness all of his years, because in truth, really, Yosef was alive. As soon as he found out Yosef was alive, that was machaya. You know what means machaya? It actually sounds like, well, in Hebrew, chai means life. Machaya, it causes life. It caused him to be revived. And that's why the words, V'yechi Yaakov, Yaakov lived, is connected to the previous verse. And then he just mentions the reason why Rashi left out that third reason is because he doesn't really see the difference between the first reason and the third reason. It's really all the same thing. And anybody that really contemplates about it will understand. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the second reason, which is, I think, the most fascinating thing of the evening. And we said that the second reason was that he wanted to reveal the end days, and it was closed off from him. Okay, anybody have anything to say at this point or want to interject? Did we lose Sharon? I think so. Okay. So, just to repeat, the second mentioning in the Medrash was that he wanted to reveal the end days, and it was closed off from him. But it doesn't just say that; it says "V'nistalka mimenu hashchina," was removed from him the divine presence. In other words, we talk about the Shechina, the divine presence. That's how we're able to have Ruach HaKodesh. That's how we're able to connect with the infinite. Right? To see, like Adam Rishon saw, from one end of the world, end of the universe to the other end of the universe, through the 36 supernal lights. And we light on Hanukkah, just to remind us, which is in the Torah. It's embedded in the Torah. Okay? So he says, because he wanted to answer a question. Now, you have to get the question, hopefully it'll bother you once we realize, oh my gosh, it's like staring right in front of us. It says, Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. You're going to tell me we didn't know that? It's so simple to figure it out. Anybody with math, a simple understanding of math, could figure this out. How do we know? Didn't he just say, when he came down to Pharaoh, I'm 130?
Yeah.
And he died at 147.
And the 17.
So minus 130 from 147. So why does it have to tell me this? You know, we have to ask. Come on, it's not necessary. So he says, what is it trying to tell us by having the verse telling me he lived in Egypt for 17 years? What, I didn't know that? Anybody can do the math. We know that I was reading what he says here. But when he went before Pharaoh, he says, my life is 130 years. So why would we need to tell us that he lived in Egypt for 17 years? Because we already got done saying those 17 years were really living. Why wasn't this type of discussion or language used by either Abraham, Isaac, or any of the other mothers? He's going to tell us that it was with absolute certainty that it comes to teach us that the Shechina, the divine presence, left from him. Since it said earlier on, now if you look in 45:27, which is number 6, when the children of Yaakov went up to let Yaakov know that his son Yosef was still alive, and they told him all of Yosef's words that he had said to him, and he saw the wagons that Yosef had sent to carry him, and the spirit, the actual ruach of Yaakov was revived. So we see this Tchi Ruach. Yaakov was I don't know what the word is. Revitalized. His spirit was vitalized. He was now,
Well, the spirit, his spirit. What I'm saying, his spirit lifted up.
Yeah, but it was more than that. It was returned because the Shekhinah had left from him when Yosef was sold. When Yosef was sold, that's why he was living a very miserable life for those 22 years. I mean, perhaps even before that, he was not exactly living it up either. He had a hard life. You imagine working for a woman 7 years and then being tricked. I mean, having a brother named Esav and all the trials and tribulations and running away. I mean, he had a very rough life. So then when Yosef was sold, the Shekhinah, the Ruach HaKodesh left because he had no idea what was going on. Anybody, even Yitzhak knew. Yitzhak was part of the oath not to let Yaakov know.
So from this we can understand if people are really in the sorrow, then Shekinah can leave you. Just like that.
Only prophets with simcha can have prophecy. If you're depressed, you cannot experience prophecy.
For that reason, simcha is a mitzvah.
To be besimcha, you hear this, guys? I want you to know there's another story. You have 98 curses in the Torah. The last curse, you would think, because this is the way things work. We have Shemon Esrei, we have 19 blessings, 18, 19 blessings. The last blessing is shalom. When we bench, right, we bless our grace after meals. The last word is shalom. Many of our prayers end with shalom because that's like the ultimate. Out of the curses, you know what the last curse is? You had everything and you were not besimcha. And that's why. So in other words, the worst sin, it's not just my opinion. The worst sin, Mary, you hear this? The worst sin that you can have is not to be besimcha, to serve Hashem with joy. You have to serve God, right, with passion and love. Okay? Okay. So we see in that number 6, it's Genesis 45:27, that Yaakov was revived. So those last 17 years he had this Ruach HaKodesh, he had the Shekhinah with him. But guess what happened? Sheperusha, okay, the explanation of that verse is that the Shekhinah came and rested with him. And you know that from that it says Ruach Yaakov. Now you might have thought that the Ruach rested with him all the days until his death. No, right before his death. Right now, VaYechi Yaakov, only his physical life, but not the Ruach. He lost the Ruach at this point before he was able to, reveal the end days. Because when Yaakov came to Egypt, I'm not sure when it was released, but he does say in 46:30, that would be number 8. And you can read the Rashi on that. The spirit of Yaakov was revived, the Shekhinah which had separated from him because of his grief, meaning the grief of the sale of Yosef, rested upon him once again. Now, number 8, Israel said to Yosef, I will die this time. He actually says to Yosef, I will die this time, amuta hapam, achrei ra'oti, after I see your face. So what does it mean, after this time? It really means a second time. I will die again. I mean, I got my life back. So look in Rashi, I will die this time. Its simple meaning is in the Targum renders, if I should die this time, I would be consoled. That's pshat. But the midrashic interpretation is, however, I thought that I would die 2 deaths, one in this world and in the world to come. Because the Shekhinah had left me, and I thought that the Holy One, blessed be He, would hold me responsible for your death. Now that you are alive, I will die but once. Okay. So, im kein miyad hayem muchan el litzavos mechamat mita. So immediately, right now, he knew he was going to die. He wanted to, give his last will and testament and bless the children. So we're now getting into the whole blessing of the tribes. And at the time, he was going to bless the tribes. He was going to tell them the end times. What's going to happen? Like in our generation, right? We're living in the end times. Good chance. Every day gets closer and closer. So we certainly hope so. And after we get finished reading this, you'll realize you better be hoping it is. So he gathered everyone to read the last will and testament before his death. But Hashem was concerned lest he revealed the end days, and that's why God removed from him the Shekhinah, the divine presence. But we don't know why. We don't know the reason why why the Shekhinah was removed. Okay? Kol al kain bo parsha zistum, and this is why the parsha is closed. Why that there's no space between the verses, between the verse of Yaacov, Yisrael settled in the land of Goshen, since it was well known. Whoa, ready for this? It's well known. Okay, you and I didn't know this until we read this, right? But it's well known that a great amount of damage will be caused from knowing the end. Because all the earlier generations, they knew that the redemption would not take place in their days. It said 400 years. So, if you have, we're talking about those generations, if he told them, you have another 210 years left, or was it 190, whatever it is, that they would be lazy. They wouldn't do tshuva. They'll say, I'll do it in the end of my life if I live that long.
Because for this reason,
that's what he says. Lo yidroshos pnei Hashem, that once you know that it's all beyond your lifetime, you will no longer seek out a relationship with God. Listen to the words. Lo yidrashu et pnei Hashem. You would no longer seek to the face of God. Levakesh ala geula, to request and desire the redemption, the altmura, and all that it's worth. Because you say, what's the use? What's the point? Live life and be merry, for tomorrow you'll die. I'm not going to sacrifice for this. It's a big sacrifice. So already then, don't tell them the end, because if they knew the end and it wasn't a foreseeable future, there would be a giving up hope and then a bad situation. Yeah? Okay, so he quotes a book called Educator, who mentions this medrash, and he says that when Yaacov wanted, he desired, he sought out to reveal the end days, God said, now this is a quote from Isaiah 43:22, which is number 10 on your source sheets. But you did not call me, O Jacob, for you wearied of me, O Israel. It's really only talking about the first part, it doesn't matter. God does not want the Jewish people to be in a position where they forget about the relationship. It's all about the relationship with God. Can you imagine? It's what it's all about. Just like husband and wife, it's about the relationship. With us and God, it's all about the relationship. God wants us. He squeezes us. It says by tzaddikim, they have a hard life. Why? He desires the prayers. We talked about this before. He desires the prayers of the righteous. It's all about the relationship. Rabbi Kellerman, he speaks about when he was in Harvard University doing a thesis on comparative religion. What really bothered him about the Orthodox Jews is, the only way they're moving their lips. Right? They're claiming the only way God's going to hear them if they move the lips. Isn't God a God who knows everything what's in your heart? And for 10 years he pondered the question. And then he saw 3 women walking down the street one day, and they were all talking at the same time. How could anybody be listening? It was all about the relationship. Anyway, I hope you get that. God wants the relationship. He wants us to call out. But this Isaiah 43 is a criticism. But you did not call out to me, O Yaakov. So what happens when you know the end? You give up hope. Shelo hayiti chas al kvodi. They were not concerned about God. Because anybody who knows the end is causing, or reveals this end, will cause such a great damage. They're not going to call to him. They're not going to request to know his face. Any of the earlier generations. So Yaakov, we know, and he's talking about them, they requested a permanent settlement. They requested a settlement in a permanent way in a foreign country, like Egypt. Where's the best place for a Jew to live? In the Holy Land, in Israel. We need to be here. But when you start building and permanent, acquiring properties and building these huge palaces, and you have no desire, because you got the life, you got Target, you got Dunkin' Donuts, 7-Eleven, whatever. You know what I mean? You got the comfy life over there. This is very bad for the Jew. Liot lehem achiza ba'artzotam ketoshavim, to actually live like permanent residents in these other countries. And this is the important word, Meir, ukemit yashim min hageula, and to give up hope, to forfeit, to lose all hope of any redemption. Or your whole life is about building up, acquiring properties in this world, or at least in the outside of Israel. Al Kain, that's why Satam v'chatam Hashem. That's why God closed off and sealed the end. Haketz ha'acharon, the end of ends, the last days. Kadesh b'chol dor v'dor, so that every single generation is yivakshu es pnei Hashem, should seek out the face of God, to know God. Ve'et David Malkam, and these are very important words, and David's kingdom. Who doesn't want King David to return? Who doesn't want the Mashiach? Anybody who doesn't want Mashiach is basically giving up hope. We need, we need a geula, we need a redemption, we need salvation. But guess what? He also doesn't want us, he doesn't want us to live amongst the non-Jews in their countries. Meaning he doesn't want us to live in the countries of the non-Jews. But rather we should be anticipating the end and the salvation constantly. Always. Now this is the Kliyakar. He writes this 400 years ago. He said, but because of our sins, this midah, this attribute, this character trait is very common amongst us. Now he was talking about when you tell them when it is, that's already bad. And when you don't know when it is, it's supposed to be good. But guess what? 400 years ago, we didn't know what it was. And so many people, they are so ignorant, Jews are ignorant, they live amongst the Gentiles, meaning in Prague, he was the Rav of Prague, all through Europe. You know what the European Jews' ends were. And they build big palaces, very important properties. V'shelavanim, stones that will last forever. Binyan hakayam, the whole building would last forever. Ubasiba zu leolam einam dorshim es pnei Hashem. Because of this reason, they're never going to be seeking out the face of God. They're too comfy. B'chol leiv, with their whole heart, lahaviyim el artzam, to come back to the land. They've given up. And we see this today in America, I'm sorry to say. Whoever's watching this. Al Kain HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's why God was Manicham Shama. He left them there. I don't want to tell you what all the prophets have to say, but we always say negative prophecies don't have to happen. Okay, if you need to understand what that means, the prophet comes to warn us and to guide us to get back on the path. So if a prophet comes and tells you a good prophecy and it doesn't come, he's a false prophet and off with his head. But if he comes and tells you these predictions and they don't come true, it could be that, remember, he came to warn you to do tshuva, to repent.
There was a shift.
And there was a shift. There was a conscious awakening. Yeah. And a tshuva. So there's no guarantee that he's a false prophet, if a negative prophet. So negative prophecies don't have to happen. Clear, everybody? Just nod. Okay. Am I boring anybody yet? Okay. And according to this proposal that we've spoken about so far, the verse in 27 that Israel settled in the land of Goshen is speaking about the guilt of Israel. We're talking about something negative, a sin, the guilt of Israel. That they requested to be toshavim, they wanted to be these permanent residents with a land holding that's not even theirs. Yeah. We come to Israel, we're going to leave it all behind. And v'nezik zeh bolem, and of course the damage would come to them. Because Lefi Sha'aketz Galus Mitzrayim Hayanodah, because they knew they weren't going to be released for another 400 years, or perhaps, right, with the recalculation, only 210. Al Kain Hod Hadoros Harishonim. That's why those earlier generations, which knew with absolute clarity that in their own days they would not be redeemed, they sought out all these things that are mentioned in the verse. That's why the pasuk comes together to tell us V'chi Yaacov. Yaacov lived to teach us that this nezek, that this damage that came out as a result of those generations, because they were the end was known to them. That's what actually caused Yaakov to live, but not to have the ruach. He didn't have the ruach at the end. Ki im Yaakov levado hayachai. It was only Yaakov who was alive, but now with the ruach. Kidei shelo yigale hakaitz ha'acharon. The ruach was removed, so he could not reveal the end days. Velo shelo yitpashet nezek zelodoros. So this damage would not spread even beyond that generation. If they knew it, they would have passed it down, right? The Jews have a great method of passing transmission of oral Torah. We would cease to exist if we all knew the end of days exactly. Okay? Okay, guys, we have a little bit more to go if you want to continue with me. It says that 29, it says, the time approached for Israel to die, so he called his son for Yosef. He said to him, please, if I have found favor in your eyes, please place your hand under my thigh. Now this is the important part. And do kindness and truth with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt. So it says, came close the days of Israel to die. So there's a measure that says, there's some days, we'll call them negative, that are days of death, and there's some days where there's no death. What does that mean? The whole time that a tzaddik, a righteous person, is in this world, we find out that the whole world has some blessings because of him. There is some tranquility and peace that will exist in the world while the tzaddik's still alive, and when he dies, the peace diminishes and is batal and void, and it's because of his death. So it says the whole time Yaakov was alive that there was no slavery. But for Yaakov himself, am I reading this right? Although Yaakov Atzmo, he never died. Yaakov actually never died. It doesn't use the word death. We already said that, right? It says it came close to him to die, and we read that as he didn't reach the age of his fathers. But when he does die, it says that he expired. And not in even Hebrew, it's yigva, which is like he sighed. Exhaustion. He went to sleep. He went to sleep. Meaning his physical body stopped functioning, but his soul lived on. Even though a righteous person is called alive when they're dead, I know you've got to get ready to keep this. A evil person in his life is called dead. So a righteous person, when he's dead, he's alive. And an evil person, when he's alive, he's dead. So I'm going to read the verses again. Even though a righteous person is called alive in his death, nevertheless, it mentions Yaakov specifically because we darshan about him that he was so connected with his sons, right? We call the 12 sons of course, Israel, doesn't matter, here's another name, Yaakov, the 12 sons of Yaakov. He, the person, Israel, Yaakov, is connected with his 12 sons. So as long as his 12 sons are alive, meaning us, he's alive. Just like any father with his children. We'll see in a second. So because of his strong connection with his own seed, Ma'azer b'chaim, just like his seed is alive, Afu b'chaim, so too he is alive. Just like any son is a portion, a chelik of his father, so too any uber is a fetus. A fetus is just a limb of the mother and the father. I lost my V'yod zera b'chayim, and as long as the seed is still alive, meaning generations later, as doime kilu gam hu b'chayim, so too it's like the father's alive, meaning to say he's actually a part of him. Part of him is still alive. So it's mentioned specifically by Yaacov because his bed, so to speak, was complete, meaning he had the 12 sons and they were all righteous. They were all righteous. Kulam zera chai rav po'alim. They were all activists for God. Avahamoili ben Rasha, but someone who gives birth to an evil person, he's called in his life death. While he's alive, he's called dead. As ein bara mezake abba. The son does not give any credit. There's no credit to the father. Kidayo labo min hadin liyot kenidon. It's as if he's worthy of excommunication. Who asmakroy mace, he's considered dead while he's alive. Anybody who's excommunicated, I know it sounds really like a rough thing. There is such thing as excommunication, and the person cannot be counted in a minyan. He can't join a prayer, a quorum, 10 people for prayer. They won't count him in. You can't marry your children off to them. You can't be in business with them. You can't be friends with them. The whole point is for them to do tshuva. It's not a punishment saying, you're out, we have nothing to do with you ever. You're out now until you do tshuva. So you do tshuva, you come back. So it doesn't really have much effect today. But in the old days, when everyone knew each other, small towns, where are we at? So he says, Eit yikar chelik aviv chai. So how is that possible when you have a son who's evil? How does that reflect? How is he alive? So we have a drasha. Look now, I think it's number 12. No, it's number 11. 11 says, Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his fathers and that Yoav, the commander of the army, had died. Right? Ki shachav David im avotav. David slept with his fathers. V'chi met Yoav. See, David was a tzaddik. Does it say he died? No. It says he slept with his fathers. It doesn't mean he slept with his fathers. It means he went to bed. He was expired. He went to bed. Sleep. Dead. You know what I mean? Like, pulse stopped. But his soul went on. And Yoav, who was evil, it says he died. So you can see clearly the difference. Righteous people do not die. They live on forever. And Rashayim are even dead while they're alive. Okay? So I'll just read the last thing he says here. Lama hiskir b'David shachiva b'Yoav misa. Why does it mention David went to sleep while Yoav died? Because Lefisha David hiniach ben tzadi kamoso. Because David left over a righteous son like him. Shlomo. Masha ain't came b'Yoav, which is not the same case by Yoav. Mitam zen nemra shiva b'Yaakov. That's why it says Yaakov went to sleep. V'amisa nemra dafka al hayamim. Okay. That's really all I prepared in terms of the parsha. But we could talk about anything you want, you know. Anybody have any questions? I think I put everyone to sleep. Mayor.
I thought I'm kind of having a problem with Yoav. Yoav was well, in one side he killed Absalom. So I don't know. I'm having a hard time with the idea that he's considered not good because he did good.
Who killed Yoav?
I'm not sure.
I think David had him killed, right? Here, let's see. 2 Kings, is he going to say it? David did not want Absalom killed. This was David's son, even though he was evil.
Correct.
Even though Absalom was evil, David did not want to have him killed. We're looking in 1 Kings 11, 21.
other explanation I can see, he was Sarat Tzava, because he was a military man. He killed a lot of people. So I don't know if that counts against him. He's killing the enemies. That's okay.
That shouldn't be a problem. Let's see.
Which one? The first king?
Yeah,
We're talking about Yoav. Yoav was the military leader for King David. And here, the way it's mentioning separating between a righteous man and Yoav is a little different. So I'm asking Rabbi Aaron to find on one side, I know that Yoav was a good military leader, but on the other side, he also killed Absalom, the son of David.
Yeah.
So
I'll look up. I'll try to find the more about this verse. If you look like a Mikras Gedolos, it might have a explanation on that verse. Okay, so that's a good question. I'm going to look it up. Anything else?
okay, no, I wanted to know. Anything else?
So you said you're recording this so we can find the video on where?
Yeah. Are you a subscriber to my YouTube channel? So it'll go
I
up.
guess I could be.
Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, so it's just Yiboneh. Yiboneh with my logo. You subscribe, but even if you don't, just go on there every time and look for one of the, what you're looking for.
Benaiah, who killed Yoav commanded by King Solomon.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Kings 150. Okay.
But why? Because he killed Absalom. Because David did not want Absalom killed, and he killed him. So David had him killed. So he was evil. He went against the king. But I'm gonna look it up better.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get it clear for you, Mayor. Anyway, so Yiboneh on YouTube. I'm in the middle of uploading a different class. I think last week I didn't upload it, and I put it together. So.
No, it's good that you're recording them. That way, we're able to look at it if there is something that, because you know how we listen to you now, and then me and Kathy and the girls here will write the notes, and then we'll have questions. And of course, as you go, you think about this, and you think about this item and this item, and
Right.
your brains keep going.
I have to tell you, I mean, like, I did this piece a few years ago. I try to do a little bit each year. Sometimes I go back, and I see things I never saw before.
Yeah.
Like a lot. Not like, oh, just that one little point. A lot. So I'm giving this class on Shabbat morning to a synagogue. I only have 45 minutes with them, and we spent like an hour and a half. So I have to cut it real short. But they're there because they want to learn the Hebrew. But they also know a lot more. I don't have to translate everything. Whatever, we'll get the main points. I have to figure out what parts to actually sum up, and then spend only a little bit of time in the Hebrew with them. But Meir mentioned he wanted to learn, let's say, more like halacha. But I didn't know if anybody else is. So only Michelle and her husband are on. But I imagine Sharon wouldn't be against it. I guess Heather probably wouldn't be against it. The only question is.
What is it?
More like, so let's say the details of how a Jew lives his life.
Oh, okay.
Like blessings, for example. We could just cover ideas of blessings. We could spend 15 minutes out of sometimes we spend 2 hours So I don't mind, maybe if there's a book here that deals with that, I can open up, we can start today or start next week, but maybe it's better if I give you the source sheets and just spend like 15 minutes each time, just starting off with some ideas of halacha. But it's up to you guys.
Sounds good.
So I'll tell you one thing. We wash our hands in the morning, okay?
Right.
So there's different reasons why.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a Siddur and I do a lot of the prayers in there and it talks about that.
So do we know why? The Shulchan Aruch explains why. The commentators explain why. So why do we wash our hands in the morning?
I don't know the reasons.
So
I know you do them and you do the blessing
Oh,
and
to
that's
wash
it.
off the spirit world, isn't it? To wash off the spirit world while you're asleep?
That's what I think.
yeah, so I'm going to tell you there's 4 reasons. The Gemara, the Mishnah Berurah brings down 3, but I break them into 4 reasons. So you cannot make blessings with dirty hands. So if I scratch anywhere in my body that's normally covered, that's where sweat would accumulate. So that's already considered dirty. Or touching a private area, even if you come out of the shower, is still considered. So you can't make blessings. So when you're sleeping, we say that your hands are all over. You're not conscious of what you're touching. You can be scratching who knows what. You know what I mean? Like, let's just say your armpit. You know, you're scratching in the middle of the night. So, okay, so you have to wash your hands. So that's one reason to wash hands. Another reason is because when we go into the temple, if we were the high priests, right, and the Kohanim, you cannot do the service without washing your hands and your feet. So our purpose in this world is to be priests serving God. So just like we're about to enter, just when you wake up in the morning, you're entering 20 hours, however, I only sleep 4 hours, but let's say, whatever, it's 16, 18 hours of life. Those hours of life is service to God. So you're like a priest serving God. Okay. Third reason, which is, it's called a Bria Chadashah. You are born again. You are a brand new being, just created to serve God. So that's why I think that the second and third are really the same, but I divide them up a little bit because it's different language. One is a Bria Chadashah, and the other one is like a Kohen serving in the temple. So a Bria Chadashah is a brand new being. You're just like, I don't know, breaking out of the cocoon, out of the womb, and that's it. You're born again. You got the next 18 hours to serve God. But it's a different language. And the fourth reason, which is a little bit more spookier, as Michelle was pointing out. Now, when one sleeps, they experience what we call 1/60th of death. Now, we know that when someone dies, they actually become tumah. That's why we have the red heifer and everything. And if anybody actually goes to a cemetery, when they leave the cemetery, they have to wash their hands. So when someone, basically we have 5 levels of our soul. And the highest level of our soul actually departs. That's what's going up. And in the morning, it re-enters our body. So anytime holiness is a vacuum, that tumah, that impurity always comes. So now that the soul comes back and forces out the tumah leaves your body through your fingertips, meaning it leaves through the extremity. So since it leaves through that and it leaves a little bit of residue, you're just washing off those last bits of residue. I know that sounds spooky. So you're not supposed to touch any opening like wounds, your eyes, any openings in your body.
As soon as you wake up.
As soon as you wake up, you're supposed to wash your hands before you touch your eyes or any other openings on your body. Because of the residue of the Ruach Ra, this evil spirit, whatever that means. But that only entered as a result of the vacuum that was. Now another great thing my rabbi told me is when you go to sleep, think of Torah. Think of the greatest questions you have. Because what happens is that higher level of your soul departs and it goes to the world of truth. There's a world up there. There's a world of truth that it enters. And then when it comes back into your body, he's not saying that you will be consciously aware of the answers, but at least subconsciously, you have go to sleep with a question of Torah, right? Go to a question with a great question, and at least subconsciously, if not consciously, you'll be able to act on it or perceive things differently during the day, the following day. So there's a halacha that one should not even walk Dalet Amot. Dalet Amos is 6 to 8 feet. So you have a little bucket by your bed with a little cup to wash your hands with, and these waters should be thrown down the drain. They shouldn't be used for anything else. I know that if there was a famine or whatever, I think then use as minimum amount of water as possible. The more water used, the better. Today we have running water, so it's not a problem, but back in the day you had to take it out of the well and whatnot, and people were, exact. But it's best to go all the way to your wrists to pour. Now what do? I mean, I'm left-handed, but let's assume everyone does the same thing. You take your, you fill it with your right hand, because the right hand is mercy, and that's what you're going to do, strong hand, and that's what you're going to do the mitzvah with. But what does it mean? You take it, and then you pass it to the left, and then you pour on the right. You pour on your right first. Now, when you wake up in the morning, it's different than when we wash for bread or for other things. So in the morning, we wash alternatively 3 times. We start with pouring on the right, then the left 3 times. The right again, the left, right, left 3 times. And that all has to do with getting rid of this ruach ra, the remnants of the spirit that might be on you. For washing for bread, it's the same idea. You take it in your right, and you pass it to your left, and you first pour on your right, but you pour 2 times on your right, according to Chabad 3 times, and then you change hands and pour it 2 times on your left. But what do they do in Italy?
No, according to I follow Chabad.
So you do 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
But everyone agrees a minimum of 2 times, but in the morning it's for sure 3 times.
See, Rabbi Aaron, what I know is, I know that you do certain things, but I don't know the reason behind them. Like,
Well,
for example, I go to the cemetery, I go in from one place, okay? I wash my hands, I don't dry them, and I go out from another side. The reason, I don't know. I know this is what you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So let me just digress a little bit. That's why we're going to learn. Last week I mentioned certain things that we never really got to speak about, and I think it's very important. And Chris, don't leave, because it's very important you hear this. All the blessings that happen, all the blessings that come to a man in his house is on account of his wife. Did we kind of started speaking about this a little bit? And I don't know, so this is going to get a little X-rated, okay? But why it says that a woman is called lechem, a woman is called bread. That's because all the feasts, when we eat, it's called zan, it's, right, the birkat hamazon, it's sustenance. All the sustenance comes through the woman who's bread. A prostitute is called a zonah. This man is misplacing, and he will go hungry. He will search for bread and will not find. This person who's putting his zan, he's spending his own money that he should be spending on his wife for food, he's misplacing, and he's using a prostitute. And it says anybody who's, and this is the secret of Yosef, why he was so successful. Remember, he said, look at my circumcision. I have kept the covenant clean because you sold me to Egypt, which is the most promiscuous place, the lowest place on earth when it comes to sexuality, but I kept myself guarded. I merited to be the provider, the viceroy, the one who was able to save 7 years of plenty. And in the end, because Yaacov came down, there was no famine for more than 2 years. It stopped when he got down. But we talked about this last time, that, right, we didn't go into as much detail as I just did, that all of the providence, all of the sustenance, all of the blessings in a home comes as a result, a direct result of the peace between the husband and wife, and the way that the husband respects and honors his wife. Then he'll see a reflection of the providence coming. And God forbid, when he's disgusted with his wife, which is a sign not of the opposite of peace in the home, and he goes for the bread outside the house, then he'll find extreme poverty. It's like not just a punishment. We talk about punishment, mida keneged mida. Remember, all these measure for measure, we call punishments, not punishments, they're signs to wake one up that they're on the wrong path. So a righteous person will pick up the signs and then will do repentance and tshuva. The evil person, of course, evil, the word rasha, rash means noise. He's so distracted with noise. He's not having a good day. He's not having a real intimate relationship with God, and too many distractions. And he probably won't pick up the message, and will be punished and see it as a punishment. But the righteous person will amend his ways and do tshuva. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you that I think Chris and whatever. I just wanted to share, make sure you got that in, because that's an important lesson that we left off from last week.
Yeah, that was really good. Thanks.
Okay,
Cool.
so we'll meet next week, Bezrat Hashem.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thank you.
great seeing you all. All the best.
שיהיה לך שבת שלום.
Shabbat Shalom Mivorach, holy brother and sisters.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I don't know how to turn this thing off. No, I'll figure it out.